The Iraqi army is adamant they will crush the country's armed militias. And this comes despite battles spreading from Basra to other Iraqi cities. But can they do it alone? And how significant would its victory be? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome, I'm Jane Dutton. The Iraqi army is trying to take back control of Basra. 2 days of fighting has already left dozens killed and hundreds wounded. Well, the battle for Basra is seen as key to disrupting the Shia militia who are vying for control of this oil-rich city. Behind that lie lucrative networks of smuggled drugs, oil and guns. In short, the army is on an offensive to disband the gangs. And Iraqi Premier Nouri al-Maliki is in Basra's military HQ to supervise the operation personally. But the fighting is intense and the unrest has spread quickly from Basra into the capital, Baghdad. In a bid to stabilize the crisis, Maliki is given until Saturday morning for all militia to lay down their weapons or else. But those loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr remain defiant.
We call upon all Iraqis to stage a general strike all over Iraq as a first step. And if the Iraqi government does not respect our demands, the demands of the public, then the second step will be civil disobedience in Baghdad and all the other provinces. After that, they will have to wait for the third step, which will not be disclosed at this time.
Well, Basra is an important city. It's the center of Iraq's vast oil wealth in the Shia-dominated south of the country. And several rival Shia forces are vying for supremacy. First, Basra is a stronghold for the Mahdi army loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr. But the Sadr's militia has kept a low profile since a ceasefire was called last August and was then extended last month. Then there's the Supreme Islamic Iraqi Council led by Abdelaziz Hakim. It's the country's dominant political party, a key US and Iraqi government ally. And it's known to have close ties with Iran. The Fadila party is a key player in the city as well. Though it is smaller than the others, Basra's influential governor is a Fadila member. While these major players fight over Basra, dozens of splinter groups, gangs and criminal organizations are also pulling the city in different directions. Well, joining our discussion today are our guests. They're both in London. Sabah al-Mokhtar, he's a UK-based Iraqi expert, and Crispian Kass, he's a security expert and served in Iraq as a former officer of the British Army. Mr. al-Mokhtar, there's a call by al-Maliki for these fighters to lay down their arms by Saturday. Is that likely to happen?
No, it's not likely, and I think he's trying to buy time. Part of the problem he has is that the forces of the police and the army, who are in fact from the other factions of the militias, but they are dressed up in military fatigue, so they are now representing the police and the army, but they are the people who are fighting with the Mahdi army on trying to get power over Basra, because they are waiting for the local election, which are coming presumably shortly.
So who are they likely to listen to?
They are likely to listen to Abdelaziz al-Hakim. They are likely to listen to Maliki, who represent the two other factions who are fighting, but at the same time they will be listening to Muqtada al-Sadr, and this is part of the family feuds between al-Hakims and al-Sadrs, as well as the pro-Iran and anti-Iran forces.
Mr. Kass, do you agree that this will probably rumble on to at least the October provincial elections? Is this one big battle or start of many others?
It's difficult to tell, and it's very, very difficult to work out how any military conflict is going to resolve. I mean, there are three real issues you have to look at. One's the scale of the opposition. Is it just going to be a few disaffected and disenfranchised members of the militias? Or is it going to be something much bigger together? Are people going to come together and take against the government? I mean, the government will only be too painfully aware of what happened in April '04. When whole swathes of the country, particularly in the south, fell out of control of the US forces who had been there just over a year.
How does this differ from that battle so far? Still early days.
Well, exactly. It's still early days. Also in consideration, you've got to look at the forces the government have used, or the government are using. I spoke to someone recently who's been involved in training them. He says they're good, but they're not that good, and they certainly don't have the same level of efficiency as they did under Saddam's time. And the final question is how much political will exists in Baghdad to solve this? Without political will, there can be no early resolution.
Mr. Al-Mokhtar, maybe you could answer that question.
Yes. First of all, I think one has to note that the allegiance which the army and the police had in the previous time before the occupation was the allegiance for the nation, for the country. At the present moment, the allegiance of the armed forces are sectarian and leadership and tribal. So it is not likely that they are going to be able to control the situation. There are reports about policemen and army people deserting their posts and not taking part in the military action. The government, which is in theory trying to run the show, in fact the government is not in control of anything because it is still unable to control the parliament or the government or the army. So
and
no one knows.
Excuse me interrupting, if it doesn't have the political will to do that, why not? Basra holds 80% of Iraq's oil.
Well, everybody is making a reference to the oil. The oil is not in the street. The oil is in the wells and in the pipes. Whether you have a situation where there is feuding and fighting or whether it's peaceful, it's nothing to do with the oil. It so happened that geographically the oil is in Basra.
Mr. Al-Mokhtar, you say this is not purely for oil. Is it then being done under the mantle of religion, or is it just a grab for power?
It's grab for power. It is partly the conflict between the various factions, political factions. They are all Shiites, but they are political factions. Plus, there is the criminal elements which are infiltrating all the systems and all the militias which are in control of revenues and trying to get bribes and stealing and misuse of the public funds. So it's a combination of all these factors, but I think the overriding element is that this is the control of the power in anticipation of the election in October.
Mr. Kass, Muqtada al-Sadr has threatened 3 stages. He said the third is the most dangerous. What are you expecting?
Well, he's obviously referring to a resumption of violence, i.e. breaking the ceasefire, which he renewed last month. I mean, as you're aware, that the ceasefire has been one of the main contributing factors to the downturn in violence. You had the surge, you've had the growth in the Sunni heartlands of them turning against Al-Qaeda and looking after their own communities. But a major part has been the ceasefire, and he's been using this as a sort of a pawn in the political process to establish his influence. But one of the more significant things which is coming out of this whole uprising is actually how much influence he does have now and how much control he has over his militias.
And if Hakim is considered to be Iran's man, then who is funding Muqtada al-Sadr?
That's a very difficult question. He's kept a very low profile recently, and people say he's in Iran. And we haven't actually heard him speak during these incidents the last couple of days. It's all come from his spokesman in Najaf. I mean, traditionally he's considered more of a sort of Iraqi nationalist, you know, one who doesn't really have the same ties with Iran. That sounds odd, even though he's there. But the various factions which are going on at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see which way he comes out and whether he's able to control his militia and whether he's able to keep a ceasefire in place.
And it'll also be interesting to see the way Iran comes out of this. Mr. Al-Mokhtar, what role are they playing at the moment?
The Iranians are backing everybody at the present moment. They are backing Muqtada al-Sadr and his lot because they are fighting the Americans. They want to show the Americans that they don't have a quiet role. They are trying to embarrass the British government because it's keeping its forces in Basra, and yet there is a civil war where the British army is not taking part. So if they are not taking part because they don't want to be part of it, one would wonder, why is the army sitting there in Basra doing what? So this is an attempt by Iran to influence that aspect. The second thing, they are trying to make Maliki agree more with them with the policies that they are following at the present moment. The situation with the present government, al-Maliki is really not in control of anything. He knows that the Americans want to change him, but there is no substitute to him for the present moment. So everybody is playing this divide and rule, and everybody is backing everybody within the area. But principally, they are vying for power to control the south of Iraq during the next election. And the government, in fact, has been provoking the Mahdi army into that one. That's why the reason for that is that the army and the police were being moved to Basra even before the fighting started. So clearly they were provoking Muqtada al-Sadr and the Mahdi army into this situation in the last 2-3 weeks by arresting some of the people, by attacking some of their, or making the other parties attack their offices and properties. So this is a show of force by the government in preparation for the election. They want to get rid of the influence of the Muqtada al-Sadr and the Mahdi army.
Okay, Mr. Kass, if they are able to do that, do you think the Americans will then finish the job for the Iraqi military in Baghdad?
They might have to. Again, we get back to the question of political will, whether it's the political will of the Iraqi government to establish control of Baghdad over Basra, or the political will of the Americans or the British. Just a moment ago, we mentioned the British sitting back in their camps. Well, the reason for that is there's not the political will within the UK to support the British army in trying to put the South back together after the catastrophe of the invasion. The Americans obviously have shown that they're prepared to sort of increase their support in Iraq, whether it's in terms of troops and with the surge or finances. And one of the things we've been hearing a little bit is criticism from the Americans about their allies, the British, and the fact that they now realise they might have to come down to Basra to sort that situation out, while at the same time the disputes in the south are starting to take effect in Baghdad. And we heard yesterday that parts of Sada city, the police and military were pushed out by the militias.
And we'll be looking at those options when we come back from the break, and what options the Iraqi army has if it fails to win the ongoing battle. Do stay with us.